Good afternoon, Abbotsford residents. I'm Mr. Pelican. I'm running here for your commander-in-chief for my community. I'm going to put all my years of experience working for big developers. I made it clear, Wall Financial, Peter Wall, Bruno Wall, Aquilini, and above all, Mike Dakota of Ani. What a wonderful man that taught me so much. Them years of experience make you do all hard and honest hard work. It makes you know how to cut money, make a project come together, and save millions of dollars, but it also helps you to build the skyline of your community. I was present to build a lot of skylines in Vancouver, British Columbia, and when you stand out in the Vancouver marinas and you look overboard to the Vancouver city, you see great high-rises. You see Wall Financial, the Wall Center Hotel. You see Vantana Construction. You see Intertech of Tony McGill. You see Mike Dakota through Stanley Park. And you see these great companies that all came together to build the skyline of Vancouver, British Columbia. In Abbotsford, long overdue for development. The mayors that sat here, George Ferguson, George Perry, and Bruce Bamman, were not in anybody's back pocket. Henry saw a vision. Having his dad's money, resources, and ties to the MP and MLA, and his ties into the Abbotsford Police, just like a mob, to slowly come in and penetrate and own boards, directors, and friends. The first thing he had to do, as Braun, his son, who was the economic development officer, opened them doors, was control the Abbotsford voice through social media. Not only through social media, but through Vicky Hopes. Nobody was going to be brave enough or big enough to stand on the stage and humiliate themselves and look like a conspiracy that Ed Fast, the federal Conservative MP, was running and tied to a mob that was running threats on Abbotsford and owning a city for decisions to go their way. Nobody would ever believe it till it came off the rails. So today's podcast, I want to begin by thanking a few great men that came together for my community, residents and families, to outline the brutal attack. I want to begin with these words. I want to, with Abbotsford residents, thank the Mission RCMP men and women for what they helped Abbotsford put together. Knowing my record, they could search through the database and knew that I was no criminal. I was forefront and honest with them of who I worked for and what I learned from Braun. They knew the task force wasn't allowed to be around me. Their database would show that I'm Canada's most wanted list. And they could put it together that Henry was muscling and strong-arming. When Brenda Falk, the city councillor, used her friend at the ministry to blackjack me over my kids in order to help scandals go away from Henry. When Vicky Hopes attacked Mogill, when Henry used the task force and it would unwind. This took a lot of hard, honest people that stepped up to the plate and came to work. I want to tell you that you can look. Use common sense and look. You could see Pierre Poilievre kicked Ed Fast out. You could see what happened to Mike DeYoung because he was with Henry. You could see the distance. You could see Henry load Ross Siemens. You could see the harm on the Mackenzie Bog where people got deadly sick, and it was still allowed to operate because it had ties to the mob in the city. But when Bruce Bamman's scandal happened on the chicken manure and he stood up and owned it, media outlet went, these people are getting sick. When I went to the Mackenzie Bog, 90-year-old lady spitting up black and blood from this toxic, constant smoke in her house. No city staff, no Magna, no one. You saw Manny's Farms illegal thing and you saw it all. Henry went into this city to own the city of Abbotsford. Can you believe one man having this much power? But this power was rent out of the Abbotsford APD. Why am I at Mill Lake? I thought I'd contribute. Henry always has problems with water and the flood. He packed up and he ran. He caused all them farmers. He dismantled the dike committee. When I come in as the mayor, that dike committee's coming back. The farmers are going to get their voices back. We're going to drain and clean them ditches. We're going to monitor that. We're going to make sure the farmers that are here get looked after. I'm not going to stand like Brad Viss. Please, please get that money. We need that flood money. And now you can see Brad Viss being pressured, probably had right in his speech from behind the doors. You need to argue that the Abbotsford police are so good. Mr. Speaker, the Abbotsford police are faced with all these threats and everything, Mr. Speaker. Carney can look right through and know that I am a solid lock conservative with everybody else that's involved in this, Brad. And Carney's probably saying, did you get your ass up and go to them houses that your buddy and your predecessor and boss, Ed Fast, helped cover up? No, Brad didn't. You could see Brad trying to clean and beg, I owe a favor. So what am I doing here at Mel Lane? I told you when I went to the RCMP, the Abbotsford police believed I would walk through the door. You cannot imagine the hell that my residents and I went through. The constant attack under uniform. You could see the threats, the Abbotsford police smashing my camera and everything. That was, I know the officer didn't do it because I'm a podcaster and a politician. It was ordered by Henry. You could see the fat Olenoff at Henry's house when he said there was millions of dollars Henry had up in the safe, and there was break-ins and break-ins and break-ins and break-ins. His own staff sergeant searched and said, Olenoff's Henry's bitch. He's running things. That's how I knew when Olenoff threatened to drop the lawsuit in the video that Henry had counsel in his house, the majority collaborating, or I will personally bury you. The Abbotsford police, I told you, have great men. I told you Dix and Kern are great men. But they went along with covering it up for the company to better their positions and not for this community. They ran time cards, they picked up prostitutes, they threatened a young kid in Yale Secondary because he was black, he wasn't allowed in the park. They raced our Dodge Chargers, they dumped on our bomb squads, they took their masks, the filters out of their masks, they allowed Mike DeYoung, where people were going to being charged by the police across Canada at the gathering, even pastors, to have an illegal party to endorse Dave Sadu. They allowed Gabriel on private property to smash my signs. They allowed Olenoff's threats. They allowed Gertie Purdy to cover Henry's attempted murder and his fleeing from his thing and sell his car. And the list just went on. They ran roughshod through me through the town, trying to run me out of town, and it was all for them. These were never police officers. And you could see them now, not saying, Brad Viss saying the RCMP and Abbotsford police are faced with threats, Mr. Speaker. They're emphasizing the Abbotsford police and the Surrey private police. Bob Rich went there, Mike Sir went there, so under this they would say, let's have a break. Let's have a break. So let me tell you about this break. The RCMP know that protocol and procedure was not followed when Henry did what he did. And that procedure and protocol wasn't followed because Henry was controlling the Abbotsford police. The veterans believe up there, if we now don't take pictures with Henry, we don't stand beside Ross, we use the great certified company. I wear this Olympic coat because it shows you in proudness all nations and countries came together and everybody to do what was right. And I wear it every day for the justice of Abbotsford. Since Henry had these problems here, I know there is no if, buts, or maybe. The Abbotsford police have to and must be dismantled. The organized crime ring is huge in there. Not a one can be trusted with that team. We have, could you imagine, I'll just give you a little scenario. Can you imagine me owning my construction company and my brother the head of WCB? He would clean it. Can you imagine me with all the fractions the Abbotsford police put on me and chased on me, reckless driving, endangerment driving and everything, to get me out of town, and my brother being the head of ICBC and cleaning it? Can you imagine that? This is what Henry was doing, and he set it up, but his son opened the door. So what was it for? It wasn't that Henry went in to be a better mayor than George Ferguson. I think Henry went in to be bigger than Al Capone, than Jimmy Hoffa, and then Al Cachapo. He wanted to set the record. Henry's money and his richness and his power went to his head with his friends. Henry knew what I knew from developers. The official community plan is a 5 to 10 year project, and all developers will buy something and wait for 5 years till it comes to them. Henry knew he could go in the city, work double and triple overtime, to push the community plan forward. Darren Braun showed he was manipulating the majority of council and blackjacking them. That is why I ran the video of weeks and weeks of Patricia Driesing being the head of Archway Community Futures as the director. The money that was done, the attack on the homeless, because it's a chip. And let me tell you, as mayor, Henry would say to Vicky Hopes and Ken in the newspaper, the same thing you did to Mr. Pelican with the scandal to help me load Ross so I could keep that plan going. Because Manji Sohi, Troy Gasper, and Mr. Pelican would have never followed Henry's dream. We would have changed the vision for Abbotsford. Henry knew to use Vicky Hopes to block 3,000 people. This is our community, your town, not 3 or 6 little city councillors. When Darren Braun showed the councillors were in Henry's house and brought me pictures of them collaborating to win the decisions. We're going to screw the general public for voting for Henry on Cooper's Farm, 3,000. Henry went in and changed the dockets, put it back on. Henry knew that I was coming forward with that. He couldn't have the man that he sabotaged and never sent. You never see him with a picture of Bruce Banman, and all the people that he had already turned, because Henry wasn't about it, was power. Come and call it out. So then he was going to shut people's mouth, and here's what he did. Mike, sir, I need a favor. Mike, can you go get them? And it was over. Game over. Abbotsford residents learned from Darren Braun not to walk into the APD of Abbotsford Police where Henry could squish and own evidence, and went to the RCMP. I knew, with my training, and the people I knew, the great Bill Vandersam, the people that ran with Bill, and John Rustad, I made it clear in our houses and everything, to bring them in and say, set the city free and let's go after the mob. The Abbotsford Police are an organized, high elite criminal mob. They ran time cards and you could see the costs. If I knew that there was a chance that I couldn't run this ship, I wouldn't run and mislead Abbotsford. I know I can gut and lower taxes, bring economic drivers with my experience, go financial audits. So my goal to Abbotsford is this. As your mayor, I'm going to financial audit everything Abbotsford was doing with all the councillors because they were passing decisions for Henry. And let me show you why. The official community plan is a 5 to 10 year project. This is Mill Lake. The water problems begin again, don't they, Henry? Mill Lake, behind the plan, what the residents don't know, and why you don't know that, it's like the Beetlejuice movie, the little plan of the city. You could go out and buy that and then blackjack the developer that's coming in and say, well, Aquilini, you want that 30-story tower, you got to give me 700 million. And that there, done. Henry worked his ass off with his council that would vote for him now, and he would tell Driesing, you vote for this or I'll scandal you. So what is that? When the Augustine billionaire wanted to build high-rises, Henry blocked them. When his daughters and sons wanted to build their dad's division, Henry blocked them. Maybe he didn't tell the Augustine man, I got bad problems on mountains, I moved houses. He didn't. He blocked them. But he didn't tell the Augustine man, I'm working on all these high-rises to come around Mill Lake in the official community plan. Come here and let's visionize the city. He didn't. He set his friends in to buy. That is why I'm telling you, under financial audits with the RCMP, and need the RCMP, no friends, no private police from Surrey will come in, and we'll go after the most important thing, the gusher out of the city, where Henry was after, bigger than the drugs that hit our streets across Canada. Henry lobbied Ron Funkadiverse, which is his partner, the illegal site, down on the old Abbotsford newspaper where they hit it, and all that. If you go on George Ferguson and McCallum and just drive that little block, there's 12 development signs that are posted and being pushed on the developer to post the development signs. But Ron Funk hid his. Ron Funk ran the mayor, Ross Siemens, and councils when it's a developer's not allowed to, because this is what you get. Ron Funk then bought the Vaquero Ranch, coming soon. Ron Funk then went by the old hospital and bought, because council were warding for Henry. Henry's son was the economic development officer, went out and started a planning company that you could go to him and he works the back deals because he knows Peter Sparanazing everything. Why do I do this? This was an attack on families. It has to be called out and stopped. And these guys were a mob, like Pierre Pauliette said, the M&Ms. Ed was running an establishment with Henry. Ron Funk bought the Little Oak Mall. We're going to knock it down, and the vision is to knock down Seven Oaks, and all this within the 5 to 10 years is high-rises. benefiting only Henry and his developer friends. And let me explain to you. When Marcus Dalvis ran Dave Sadu for the Liberal nomination over Bruce Bamman, he gave him $10,000 and said that Dave was buying the nomination votes and said Dave wasn't supposed to tell. Dave Sadu, Marcus Dalvis ran Dave Sadu, he ran Ross Siemens, and he ran Abbotsford first. And that is Marcus Dalvis's mom owns the mahogany here in Mill Lake. Marcus Dalvis, being tied to development and a CPA, knew that it was illegal to do that. Andrew Wilkinson, when I sat in his office, removed Dave Sadu and told and gave the green light to Bruce Bamman to be your MLA. We fast-tracked that. The project over beside Canadian Tower, the new high-rise that has been announced for who? Marcus Dalvis. A favor of a favor by council. The only one that Henry couldn't get voting is probably Patricia Dreesen, so he needed a bluff job on her, and they loaded her to Director of Archway, Director of Community Taj, and everywhere. This has to be and must be stopped. Henry had backdoor ties to MLAs, to MPs, and to everybody. He knew when I came in, I was changing official community plan. He knew that he had no choice but to load Ross Siemens. He took developers down a dirty road, and they stand to lose hundreds of trillions of dollars. This is why Henry ordered the Abbotsford police to target me. This is why he tried to end my life. This is why he wasn't charged. This is why he wasn't scandaled by Vicky Hopes. This is why his son wasn't scandaled and everything. The money Henry had was unlimited, but the power over Abbotsford was unbelievable. The Abbotsford police have distanced themselves and failed to do protocol, failed to do it all. But they could not stop what the great RCMP said. Social media, Mr. Pelican. There's too many of you, too many people. The democratic process was blocked. What Gabriel did, what happened at the Chamber of Commerce by Greg Toes, I'll pay Mr. Pelican for all your signs. We'll block you, and in 4 years we'll run you. We need Ross Siemens. What Ron Funke's teams did when he went into Capriccio newspaper to run Ross Siemens and pay him and get him in over everybody else, and figured, well, once we're in, we're elected. So for the last 4 years, I can tell you, Ross Siemens has been sitting with his friends, that's just Abbotsford First, voting these projects and fast-tracking them for him and his developers. We're going to pull the carpet out from under them like Ross did to the homeless. I stood by here and I've watched Ross Siemens and the manipulation with his friends through Henry doing damage control, blaming David Eby on that homeless shelter when I fully knew we have to let Ross follow Henry's steps by steps before I can release a podcast showing that the homeless shelter should have went to Valley Road where all them trucks park and it's diesel. You can't disturb that land. I'll do a video in about an hour over there. But Henry didn't want that because he wanted a warehouse and the warehouse spaces. This is what happened when Henry came up the driveway after me. He came after the wrong guy. I want to thank everybody that's been involved, from developers, from the RCMP, tremendous RCMP. I want to thank them to help this community, rebuild this community. The RCMP were there and said, Mr. Pelican, when you do podcasts, we want one thing from you. I said, what's that? We don't want all the eyewitnesses standing beside you because Henry could see who they are, have the Abbotsford police and Mike Scher and his friends use their database and now threaten them, and then they're weak. So we want to protect them. We know you're a politician and you're calling it out. So that is why we're going to dismantle the Abbotsford police. We're going to give Abbotsford its voice back in your city, and we're not going to block. But we're going to build what Abbotsford needs, big jail cells. And you can see the distance that the trouble that Ross Siemens was. Ross was the deputy mayor when them houses went down. Ross hid at his gas station. Ross followed Henry's dirty, elite, scamming plan. Ross was convinced by Henry the Abbotsford police would control it all. And when it got out of hand, and Abbotsford police, Mike Scher, in my opinion, told to hell Henry, they went to the RCMP. Henry had to threaten. Uniform, in position, doesn't cover you. If I knew, when I began this podcast, that I couldn't do this fight for Abbotsford, I wouldn't stand in the proudest shirt and jacket that brought the 2010 Olympics. I knew with all the people the people involved in elections and democracies and not allowed to block and everything, we can take a beating and stand up. And now we're going to deliver the beating. So I want to end to tell you this. Colin Watts, procedure, and protocol, paperwork always will get you off. Failing that, hanging on, believing we're the great police department. This Christmas, Colin Watts and his guys have been suffering over the summer without overtime. We're going to rip you off, and we're going to get out there and we're going to do drinking. We're going to do what's right. We're going to bring the RCMP to take over Abbotsford. And I bet you Henry Braun's got to phone David Eby and say, we can't let that happen, and they got to do this. This is the vision under my mayorship that'll stay. You'll be allowed to walk here. You'll be allowed. None of Henry's developers are coming in here. I want you to drive around and see what Ron Funkenbin did. And I want to tell you this. The movie Beetlejuice started with a development plan, and when Darren Brown showed me it and what his dad was doing, he needed Bruce out of the way and needed to push everybody. And then outlined Henry's brutal attack and Henry what he could do through the Abbotsford Police and Abbotsford News. And you could see Vicky Hope's not scandaling Ross Siemens on the homeless being kicked out, Ross not using his brains and saying, wait, David Eby, we're going into the winter. We can't move them homeless, but we're going to blame David Eby in the highway. We can't allow this to happen. We can't allow this. This was unbelievable power and threats. My opinion, and my heart goes out, because I know the Abbotsford Now police have been framing people. You saw when they smashed my camera and doing this, and how many innocent people want officers' names that just say, I don't believe in this 310, that's my badge name. This was a private police that had to answer before the city, and Henry became the boss of them, sat on the board of them, and they created heinous, filthy acts on taxpayers. Henry, there's a rule. When you got a problem and you can't swim, you don't go near water. Live, Abbotsford, British Columbia. And Abbotsford residents, the way to solve this is financial audits into everything Abbotsford First and Ross been putting forward to rush and plan. It's worth trillions of dollars. And that is what led to threats, buying my police department, buying my MP, buying my MLA, like Mike DeYoung said, you cut a deal. Henry owns Abbotsford. You got that, Mr. Pelican? Nobody says no to Henry. Henry owned Mike. He never owned Abbotsford. Mike sold his soul, his party and everything, and so did Ed, to run a mob over residents. Live, Abbotsford, British Columbia, Mill Lake.